Close your eyes for a second. No phone, no language, no yesterday, no tomorrow. You're crouched in Africa, 300,000 years ago. The fire is low. Smoke from the wrong kind of plant drifts your way. You breathe it in, not on purpose, and something shifts. Your brain sends one message, loud and clear. Do that again. That moment is where this story starts, because ever since then, humans have been chasing that feeling through every civilization we've ever built. So the real question isn't why smoking is bad for you. The real question is why humans ever started inhaling smoke in the first place. Wonderwerk Cave, the first fires of Homo erectus. The answer starts 1,000,000 years ago in Wonderwerk Cave, South Africa. Archaeologists found ash residue from a controlled fire inside a sheltered space. Not a wildfire, not an accident, but a fire that was deliberately maintained and used day after day. And this wasn't the work of Homo sapiens, it was Homo erectus, smaller brain, heavier brow, no written language at all. But they had fire, and every single night they sat around it. Here's something most people never stop to consider. Fire doesn't just produce heat and light. When organic matter burns, it releases chemical compounds, alkaloids, terpenes, volatile molecules that ride along in the smoke and, once inhaled, interact with the human nervous system. Some of those compounds are harmless, some aren't. Some are powerfully psychoactive. Early humans weren't picking campsites based on which plants happened to grow nearby. They were choosing based on shelter, water, and safety, which means that, sometimes, the wood feeding the fire came from plants releasing compounds their brains had never encountered before. The first time that happened, nobody understood what was going on. Someone just felt different, lighter, strange, maybe a little frightened, probably both. They had no idea why. But here's the thing people forget about our ancestors. They were us, just without the accumulated knowledge. They noticed patterns. They connected cause and effect. And somewhere, around some fire, one of them made the connection. That plant, that smoke, that feeling. That observation, not a plan, not a decision, just an accident noticed by a curious mind, may be one of the most consequential moments in human history. But smoke wasn't the only thing fire was doing to the human brain. Something else was happening every single night. How fire rewired human sleep and dreams. Here's a finding that almost never makes it out of academic papers. Fire didn't just feed us and protect us, it rewired how we sleep. Before fire, our ancestors slept the way every other primate does, up in trees, in short, fragmented bursts, always half alert. Sleep was a liability. You couldn't afford to go deep when something might eat you. Then fire arrived. With flames burning at the edge of camp, predators kept their distance. The dark, once lethal, became manageable. For the first time in our evolutionary history, a human body could lie flat on the ground and actually relax. And something shifted. Modern humans sleep less than almost any other primate. Chimpanzees get around 10 hours, orangutans closer to 11. We average 7 to 8. But the quality is completely different. We spend dramatically more time in REM sleep, the deep phase linked to memory consolidation, emotional processing, and vivid, immersive dreaming. Researchers at Harvard have proposed that fire is what caused this shift. Once ground-level sleep became safe, evolution could start optimizing for depth rather than duration, a brain spending more and more time in a state that's neither fully awake nor fully unconscious. And here's where it connects to everything else. REM sleep is, neurologically, an altered state. Your brain during REM looks almost nothing like your waking brain. Certain regions go quiet, others fire in patterns that never occur during ordinary consciousness. You lose track of time. You experience vivid, emotionally overwhelming things that feel completely real while they're happening. The people sitting around those fires weren't just occasionally inhaling psychoactive smoke by accident. They were also, every single night, experiencing the deepest altered states their nervous systems could produce, states that fire itself had made possible. Dreams were the first altered state, and fire is what made them possible. And when those same people woke from vivid, emotionally raw dreams, then sat back down next to that same fire and breathed in smoke that shifted their perception all over again, the two experiences would have mapped onto each other in a way that felt significant. Not identical, but related. Both happened at the edge of the firelight. Both left you with the feeling that something important had just occurred, even if you couldn't say exactly what. Fire was the bridge between those two worlds. But what was actually triggering those first waking experiences? The answer was already inside the brain. It had been there the whole time. The endocannabinoid system and deep history. Your brain contains something called the endocannabinoid system. It regulates mood, memory, appetite, and stress response. It's fundamental to how you function as a living organism. This system runs on receptors, and those receptors respond to cannabinoids. Here's the part that should stop you cold. Those receptors didn't evolve because of cannabis. They evolved for entirely internal purposes. Cannabis just happens to produce compounds that fit them almost perfectly. So the first time a human inhaled smoke from burning cannabis, and cannabis grows wild across large parts of Africa, Asia, and Europe, their brain didn't have a confused reaction. It had a familiar one. The receptors were already sitting there, waiting. The compound simply activated them in a way that was, to put it mildly, very noticeable. Noticeable enough to remember. Noticeable enough to try again. This isn't an attempt to make ancient history sound more exciting than it was. It's a legitimate hypothesis, backed by researchers across multiple fields. Given where early humans lived, exposure to psychoactive smoke wasn't some remote possibility. It was essentially inevitable. The real question isn't whether it happened. It's when people started doing it on purpose. We actually have a fairly specific answer, and it comes from a burial site in the mountains. The Pazyryk burial mounds, around 500 BC. Ancient wooden braziers, shallow bowls on legs, built to hold hot stones, and residue from cannabis plants with unusually high concentrations of THC. This wasn't rope fiber. It wasn't industrial hemp. Someone had specifically selected cannabis for its psychoactive potency and placed it at a ritual burial, deliberately, with enough knowledge of what they were doing to choose the stronger variety. Modern chemistry confirmed it. We can test the residue. We know exactly what was there. This is the oldest direct physical evidence of intentional smoking currently on record. Here's the problem with that sentence, though. Physical evidence requires physical survival. Organic material, plant fibers, wooden pipes, leather pouches, disintegrates. A few centuries in ordinary soil, and it's gone. What we find at these sites isn't what existed, it's what happened to survive. Those are very different things. So when we say the oldest evidence is 2,500 years old, what we actually mean is the oldest evidence that happened to last long enough for us to find it. The practice itself is almost certainly far, far older. 12,000 years ago, the Utah tobacco discovery. How much older? Try 12,000 years in Utah. In the Great Salt Lake Desert, archaeologists found a hearth 12,000 years old. Inside it, seeds from a wild tobacco species native to North America, not scattered randomly, but concentrated in a pattern that suggests deliberate placement. No pipes, no pottery, just seeds in a fire 12,000 years ago. That single find pushes intentional tobacco use back thousands of years past previous estimates. And it raises a question you can't unhear once you've heard it. If people in North America were placing tobacco seeds into fires 12,000 years ago, what were people on other continents doing with their own local psychoactive plants at the exact same time? Because 12,000 years ago, humans were everywhere. Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, Australia, different plants, same brain. Herodotus and the Scythians. A Greek historian described exactly what was happening on one of those continents, and nobody believed him for 2,000 years. Herodotus was writing in the 5th century BC. He traveled widely and documented what he saw, and for centuries scholars read him with a kind of respectful suspicion. Interesting observations, probably embellished. One of those observations concerned the Scythians. He described them building small enclosed tents, heating stones until they glowed, throwing hemp seeds onto the stones, and sitting inside, breathing the smoke. He wrote that they howled with pleasure. Historians assumed he was exaggerating, probably describing a steam bath and adding some drama to an otherwise dry account. Then, archaeologists excavated Scythian burial mounds. They found bronze braziers. They found heated stones. They found hemp residue, exactly what Herodotus described. He wasn't dramatizing. If anything, he was under-reporting. The man watched a group of Scythians get intensely high in a hemp-smoke tent and wrote about it as faithfully as he could. And for 2,000 years, people decided he must have gotten it wrong. The lesson here isn't really about Herodotus. It's about how much of the ancient world we still misunderstand, and how often the things we're confident we know turn out to be backwards. Tobacco in the Americas, sacred versus commercial. Now, tobacco, and why almost everything you think you know about it is backwards. Tobacco is native to the Americas, which means that until 1492, the entire Old World had never encountered it. Columbus noted in his journal, within weeks of arriving, that the indigenous people he met walked around carrying small burning sticks, inhaling the smoke and exhaling it through their mouths and noses. His crew was baffled. His crew also started doing it within weeks. Of course they did. But tobacco use in the Americas wasn't new in 1492. Residue analysis on ancient pipes dates it back at least 3,500 years. Some researchers, looking at cultivation patterns in the Amazon basin, put it at 10,000 years or more. Here's what gets lost in translation, though. Tobacco in ancient America wasn't recreational. It was sacred. It opened communication with the spiritual world. Smoke was understood as a living carrier. It carried prayers upward and brought visions back down. Blowing smoke on someone was an act of blessing. A shaman who smoked wasn't relaxing. He was doing the most serious work imaginable. Tobacco was treated with the reverence you give something you consider genuinely powerful and genuinely dangerous. The idea of smoking while waiting for a bus, that's a European invention, a very recent one that required a specific kind of industrial machinery to even become possible. Smoke as medicine, ancient Egyptian and Ayurvedic practice. Before it was sacred, it may have been something even more fundamental, medicine. The Ebers Papyrus from ancient Egypt, roughly 1550 BC, is one of the oldest medical documents ever found. It describes the deliberate inhalation of smoke from specific heated herbs as a treatment for throat and respiratory conditions. The ancient Egyptians were treating respiratory problems by prescribing inhaled smoke. From our angle, that sounds absurd. From theirs, it was logical. If a plant has therapeutic properties and the lungs are the entry point, smoke is direct delivery. The lungs absorb compounds efficiently. You're essentially building an inhaler. We still do this today. Asthma inhalers work on the same principle. Anesthetic gases work on the same principle. The delivery method survived. It's the burning part that mostly didn't. Ancient Indian Ayurvedic medicine, over 3,000 years old, describes a formal practice called dhumapana, literally, smoke drinking. Specific plants, specific conditions, specific preparation protocols. Not improvised, a formalized medical system, refined over centuries, that shows up across ancient Greece, China, Mesopotamia, and India. In every early documented civilization, there's evidence of deliberate therapeutic smoke inhalation, not as addiction, not as habit, but as medicine. In a world without surgery, without antibiotics, without almost anything we'd recognize as treatment today, something that worked even some of the time was worth everything. The fourth biological drive. But there's one more reason humans smoked, and it might be the oldest reason of all. Humans are social animals. We evolved in groups. Group cohesion, the ability to trust each other, to coordinate, to move as a unit, wasn't a nice-to-have. It was survival. And modern neuroscience has found something striking. Shared rituals synchronize neural activity between participants. They measurably increase trust. They deepen group identity in ways that are biochemically real, not just metaphorical. When a group of early humans sat together in an enclosed space and collectively entered an altered state through shared smoke, something was happening beyond whatever the compounds were doing to any one individual's brain. The group itself was bonding in a way that was extremely hard to replicate through any other means available to them. Shared, intense experience creates a specific quality of connection, mutual vulnerability, mutual trust, a sense of identity that extends past the individual. Anyone who's been through something difficult alongside other people understands this without needing a study to explain it. The ritual smoke circle wasn't just a gathering, it was social infrastructure. It was how you built the kind of trust that let you walk into dangerous situations with other people and genuinely believe they wouldn't leave you behind. That function is probably older than any of the others, older than medicine, older than spiritual use, because group cohesion predates both of those as a survival requirement. What Europe did with it. And then Europe got hold of tobacco and stripped away every bit of that context. Within decades of 1492, tobacco had spread across the Old World. Within a century, it was being traded globally. What indigenous Americans had built into a carefully managed, deeply ritualized practice over thousands of years was turned, in European hands, into a commodity product in under 4 centuries. By the early 20th century, industrially manufactured cigarettes made tobacco consumption cheaper, more convenient, and more addictive than anything that had come before. Specific compounds were added to accelerate nicotine absorption and speed its clearance from the body, not an accidental discovery of the addiction cycle, but an engineered one. Same plant, same basic act, a completely different relationship to it. A shaman selecting cannabis for its potency and placing it on hot stones at a burial site, connecting the living to the dead through shared smoke, had almost nothing in common with a tobacco executive in 1960 signing off on a campaign aimed at children. Both involved smoke, almost nothing else was the same. So, when did humans actually start smoking? The honest answer is, we're still working that out. The physical evidence takes us back 12,000 years with real confidence. Exposure to psychoactive smoke from natural fires goes back much further than that, possibly to the very first sustained use of controlled fire 1,000,000 years ago. What we know for certain is this. By the time any human civilization had developed writing, smoking was already ancient, already ritualized, already embedded in medicine, spirituality, and social cohesion, in ways that imply centuries, if not millennia, of practice before anyone thought to write any of it down. The behavior predates agriculture, it predates pottery, it predates every civilization you've ever studied. And the drive underneath it, the drive to seek altered states, to cross the threshold between ordinary experience and something that feels larger, appears to be a fundamental feature of human cognition, not a glitch. Ronald Siegel, a psychopharmacologist at UCLA, proposed that the pursuit of altered consciousness functions essentially as a fourth biological drive, right alongside hunger, thirst, and sex. And it's not just humans. Elephants seek out fermented fruit. Reindeer in Siberia eat psychedelic mushrooms and then drink the urine of other reindeer who ate them first, because the active compounds survive intact. Reindeer, running their own drug recycling operation in Siberia. If this drive is that old, that widespread, and that consistent across species, it doesn't make much sense to treat it as some kind of aberration. Our ancestors didn't. They built systems around it, rituals, restrictions, meanings. They took something powerful and gave it a context that made it survivable. Then, eventually, we took the context away. Next time you're near a bonfire and catch that smell, something shifts, something old. Your nervous system is picking up a signal it's been processing for 100,000 years. A signal that once meant warmth, safety, community, the edge of a world that was trying to kill you, made briefly manageable by fire. The smoke hasn't changed. What changed is what we decided to do with it. And that chain of decisions, from the shaman's tent to the cigarette machine, is the entire distance between something that helped make us human and something that started quietly killing us. Same fire, completely different fate.